Good morrow, scholars. Sorry for another late upload. I could not get any sleep last night, so yeah. Ooh. Anyway, welcome back to Shiver. That looked weird. I did actually fall asleep around, I don't know, sometime in the morning, but I woke up because my cats were being stupid. Well, not being stupid, they're just being mean to me. So I gave Iggy a bath, and I had to get the turtles since it was raining and it was kind of cold, and I'm a big warrior. Anyway, before I start to ramble more, we are in chapter 9, Grace. 58 degrees Fahrenheit. From the distance beyond the trees, I wanted to say stream, the scream came again. For a second I thought it was a howl, and then the cry resolved itself into words. Help! Help! I swore the voice sounded like Jack Culpepper's, but that was impossible. I was just imagining it, remembering it from the cafeteria, where it had always seemed to carry over the others around him as he catcalled girls in the hallway. Still, I followed the sound of the voice, moving impulsively across the yard and through the trees. The group was damp and the ground... I don't know what I was... I need new glasses. The ground was damp and prickly through my sock feet. I feel like I read that before, but anyway. I was clumsier without my shoes. The crashing of my own steps through the fallen leaves and tangled brush drowned out any other sounds. I hesitated, listening. The voice was gone, replaced by just a whimper, distinctly animal-sounding, and then by silence. The relative safety of the backyard was far behind me now. I stood for a long moment, listening for any indication of where the first scream had come from. I knew I hadn't imagined it. Sorry. There was nothing but silence, and in that silence the smell of the woods seeped under my skin and reminded me of him. Crushed pine needles and wet earth and wood smoke. I didn't care how idiotic it was. I'd come into the woods this far. Going a little farther to try and see my wolf again wouldn't hurt anybody. I retreated to the house, just long enough to get my shoes, and headed back out into the cool autumn day. There was a bite behind the breeze that promised winter, but the sun shone bright, and under the shelter of the trees the air was warm with the memory of hot days not so long ago. My ear itches. Sorry. All around me, leaves were dying gorgeously in red and orange. Crows cawed to each other overhead in a vibrant, ugly soundtrack. I like crows. I hadn't been this far into these woods since I was 11, when I'd awoken surrounded by wolves, but strangely I didn't feel afraid. I stepped carefully, avoiding the little streams that snaked through the underbrush. This should have been unfamiliar territory, but I felt confident, assured, silently guided, as though by a weird sixth sense. I followed the same worn paths that the wolves used over and over again. Of course, I knew it wasn't really a sixth sense. It was just me acknowledging that there was more to my senses than I normally let on. I gave in to them, and they became efficient, sharpened. As it reached me, the breeze seemed to carry the information of a stack of maps, telling me which animals had traveled here and how long ago. My ears picked up faint sounds that before had gone unnoticed, the rustling of a twig as a bird built a nest overhead, the soft step of a deer dozens of feet away. I felt like I was home. The woods rang with an unfamiliar cry, out of place in this world. I hesitated, listening. The whimper came again, louder than before. Quiet phone. Rounding a pine tree, I came upon the source. 3 wolves. It was the white wolf and the black pack leader. The sight of the she-wolf made my stomach twist with nerves. The 2 of them had pounced on a 3rd wolf. a scraggly young male with an almost blue tint to his gray coat, and an ugly healing wound on his shoulder. The other two wolves are pinning him to the leafy ground in a show of dominance. They all froze when they saw me. The pinned male twisted his head to stare at me, eyes entreating. My heart thudded in my chest. I knew those eyes. I remembered them from school. I remembered them from the local news. "Jack?" I whispered. The pinned wolf whistled pitifully through his nostrils. I just kept staring at those eyes. Hazel. Did wolves have hazel eyes? Maybe they did. Why did they look so wrong? As I stared at them, that one word just kept singing through my head. Human. 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 That would be so disturbing. Are you familiar at all with this thing called the Uncanny Valley? If you're not, go look it up. With a snarl in my direction, the she-wolf led him up. She snapped at his side, pushing him away from me. Her eyes were on me the entire time, daring me to stop her, and something in me told me that maybe I should have tried. But by the time my thoughts stopped spinning and I remembered the pocket knife in my jeans, the three wolves were already dark smudges in the distant trees. Without the wolf's eyes before me, I had to wonder if I'd imagined the likeness to Jack's. After all, it had been 2 weeks since I'd seen Jack in person, and I'd never really paid close attention to him. I could have been misremembering his eyes. What was I thinking, anyway? That he'd turned into a wolf? I let out a deep breath. Actually, that was what I was thinking. I didn't think I'd forgotten Jack's eyes, or his voice. I hadn't imagined that the human scream or the desperate howl. I just knew it was Jack, in the way I'd known how to find my way through the trees. There was a knot in my stomach, nerves, anticipation. I didn't think Jack was the only secret these woods held. That night I lay in bed and stared out the window, my blinds pulled up so I could see the night sky. 1,000 brilliant stars punched holes in my consciousness, pricking me with longing. I could stare at the stars for hours, their infinite number and depth pulling me into a part of myself that I ignored during the day. That sounds nice. Outside, deep in the woods, I heard a long, keening wail, and then another, as the wolves began to howl. More voices pitched in, some low and mournful, others high and short, an eerie and beautiful chorus. I knew my wolf's howl. His rich tone sang out above the others, as if begging me to hear it. My heart ached inside, torn between wanting them to stop and wishing they would go on forever. I imagined myself there among them in the golden wood, watching them tilt their heads back and howl underneath a sky of endless stars. I blinked a tear away, feeling foolish and miserable, but I didn't go to sleep until every wolf had fallen silent. That's kind of sad. Chapter 10. Grace. 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Do you think we need to take the book home? You know, Exploring Guts or whatever it's called? I asked Olivia. For the reading, or can I leave it here? She shoved her locker shut, her arms full of books. She was wearing reading glasses, complete with a chain on the earpieces so that she could hang them around her neck. On Olivia, the look kind of worked in a sort of charming librarian way. Sorry. I don't know what it is. I'm just really tongue-tied today. Huh. Uh-oh. What was I doing? Oh, yeah. It's a lot of reading. I'm bringing it. I reached back into my locker for the textbook. Behind us, the hall hummed with noise as students packed up and headed home. All day long, I tried to work up the nerve to tell Olivia about the wolves. Normally, I wouldn't have had to think about it, but after our almost fight the day before, the moment hadn't seemed to come up. And now the day was over. I took a deep breath. I saw the wolves yesterday. Olivia paged idly through the book on top of her stack, not realizing how monumentous my confession was. Which ones? The nasty she-wolf, the black one, and a new one. I debated again whether or not to tell her. She was way more interested in the wolves than Rachel was, and I didn't know who else to talk to. Even inside my head, the word sounded crazy, but since the evening before, the secret had surrounded me, tied around my chest and throat. I let the words spill out, my voice low. Olivia, this is going to sound stupid. The new wolf. I think something happened when the wolves attacked Jack. She just stared at me. Jack Culpepper, I said. I know who you meant. Olivia frowned at the front of her locker. This is going to get awkward. Her knotted eyebrows were making me regret starting the conversation. I sighed. I thought I saw him in the woods. Jack, I hesitated. Wolf? Olivia clicked her heels together. I'd never known anyone to actually do that outside of the Wizard of Oz, and spun on them to face me with a raised eyebrow. You're crazy. I could barely hear her over the students pressed all around us in the hall. I mean, it's a nice fantasy, and I can see why you'd want to believe it, but you're crazy. Sorry. I leaned in close, although the hall was so loud that even I had to struggle to hear our conversation. Olive, I know what I saw. They were Jack's eyes, and it was his voice. Of course, her doubt made me doubt, but I wasn't about to admit that. I think the wolves turned him into one of them. Wait, what do you mean about me wanting to believe it? Olivia gave me a long look before setting off toward our home room. Very seriously, don't think I don't know what this is about. What is this about? She answered with another question. Are they all werewolves then? What? The whole pack? I don't know. I didn't think about that. It hadn't occurred to me. It should have, but it hadn't. It was impossible that those long absences were because my wolf vanished into human form. The idea was immediately unbearable, only because I wanted it to be true so badly that it hurt. Yeah, sure you didn't. Don't you think this obsession is getting kind of creepy, Grace? My reply sounded more defensive than I meant it to. I'm not obsessed. Students shot annoyed looks at us as Olivia stopped in the hall and put a finger on her chin. That's all you think about, all you talk about, and all you want us to talk about. What in the world would we call something like that? Oh yeah, an obsession. I'm just interested, I snapped, and I thought you were too. I am interested in them, just not like all-consuming, involving whatever interested. I don't fantasize about being one. Her eyes narrowed behind her reading glasses. We're not 13 anymore, but you haven't seemed to figure that out yet. I didn't say anything. All I could think was that she was being tremendously unfair, but I didn't feel like telling her that. I didn't want to say anything to her. I wanted to walk away and leave her standing in the hallway, but I didn't. Instead, I kept my voice super flat and even. Sorry to have bored you for so long. Must have killed you to look entertained. Olivia grimaced. Seriously, Grace, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but you're being impossible. No, you're just telling me that I'm creepy obsessed with something that's important to me. That's very... The word I wanted took too long to surface in my head and ruined the effect. Philanthropic of you. Thanks for the help. Oh, grow up, Olivia snapped and pushed around me. That'd be rude. The hallway seemed too quiet after she'd gone, and my cheeks felt hot. Instead of heading home, I trailed back into the empty homeroom, flopped into a chair, and put my head in my hands. I couldn't remember the last time I fought with Olivia. I looked at every photograph she'd ever taken. I'd listened to countless rants about her family and the pressure to perform. She owed it to me to at least hear me out. My thoughts were cut short by the sound of cork heels squelching into the room. The scent of expensive perfume hit me a second before I lifted my eyes to Isabel Culpepper standing over my desk. I heard that you guys are talking about the wolves yesterday with that cop. Isabel's voice was pleasant, but the expression in her eyes belied her tone. The sympathy conjured up by her presence vanished at her words. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt and assuming you're innocently misinformed and not out-and-out retarded. I heard you telling people the wolves aren't a problem. You must not have heard the newsflash. Those animals killed my brother. I'm sorry about Jack, I said, automatically wanting to jump to my wolf's defense. For a second, I thought about Jack's eyes and what a revelation like that might mean to Isabel, but I discounted the idea almost immediately. If Olivia thought I was crazy for believing in werewolves, Isabel would probably be on the phone to the local mental institution before I could even finish a sentence. Shut up. Isabel interrupted my thoughts. I know you're about to tell me the wolves aren't dangerous. Well, obviously they are. And obviously someone's going to have to do something about that. My mind flicked to the conversation in the classroom. Tom Culpepper and his stuffed animals. What? Oh, right, I remember. I imagined my wolf stuffed and glassy-eyed. You don't know that the wolves did it. He could have been... I stopped. I knew the wolves had done it. Look, something went really wrong, but it could have just been one wolf. The odds that the rest of the pack had nothing to do with... How beautiful objectivity is, Isabel snapped. She just looked at me for a long moment. Long enough for me to wonder what it was she was thinking. And then she said, seriously, just get the last of your Greenpeace wolf love done soon, because they won't be around much longer, whether you like it or not. My voice was tight. Why are you telling me this? I'm sick of you telling people they're harmless. They killed him, but you know what? It's over now. Today. Isabel tapped my desk. Ta. I hate when people say that. Although, if they said TTFN, ta-ta for now, I wouldn't mind. I grabbed her wrist before she could go. I had a handful of fat bracelets. What's that supposed to mean? Isabel stared at my hand on her wrist, but didn't pull it away. Away. She'd wanted me to ask. What happened to Jack is never happening again. They're killing the wolves. Today. Now. She slipped out of my now slack grip and glided through the door. For a single moment I sat at the desk, my cheeks burning, pulling her words apart and putting them together again. And then I jumped from my chair, my notes fluttering to the floor like listless birds. I left them where they fell and ran for my car. Did she get that new one yet? I was breathless by the time I slid behind the wheel of my car, Isabel's words playing over and over again in my head. I'd never thought of the wolves as vulnerable, but once I started imagining what a small-town attorney and big-time egomaniac like Tom Culpepper was capable of, fueled by my pent-up anger and grief, helped along by wealth and influence, they suddenly seemed terribly fragile. I shoved my key in the ignition, feeling the car rattle reluctantly to life as I did. My eyes were on the yellow line of the school buses waiting at the curb and the knots of loud students still milling on the sidewalk. But my brain was picturing the chalk-white lines of the birches behind my house. Was a hunting party going after the wolves, hunting them now? I had to get home. My car stalled, my foot uncertain on the dodgy clutch. Oh, geez, I said, glancing around to see how many people had seen my car gasp to a halt. It wasn't as if it were difficult to stall my car these days, now that the heat sensor was giving out, but usually I could finesse the clutch and get on the road without too much humiliation. I bit my lip, pulled myself together, and managed to restart. There were two ways to get home from the school. One was shorter, but involved stoplights and stop signs. Impossible today, when I was too distracted to baby my car. I didn't have time to sit by the side of the road. The other route was slightly longer, but with only 2 stop signs. Plus it ran along the edge of Boundary Wood, where the wolves lived. As I drove, pushing my car as hard as I dared, my stomach twisted, sick with nerves. The engine gave an unhealthy shudder. I checked the dials. The engine was starting to overheat. Stupid car. If only my father had taken me to the dealership like he kept promising he would. As the sky began to burn brilliantly red on the horizon, turning the thin clouds to streaks of blood above the trees, I think under different circumstances that would be a really pretty sight. Where was I? My heart thumped in my ears and my skin felt tingly, electric. Everything inside me screamed that something was wrong. I didn't know what bothered me most, the nerves that shook my hands or the urge to curl my lips and fight. Up ahead I spotted a line of pickup trucks parked at the side of the road. Their four-ways blinking in the failing light, sporadically illuminating the woods next to the road. A figure leaned over the truck at the back of the line, holding something I couldn't quite make out at this distance. My stomach turned over again, and as I eased off the gas, my car gasped and stalled, leaving me coasting in an eerie quiet. I have no idea what I just said. I turned the key, but between my jittery hands and the redlining heat sensor, the engine just shuddered under the hood without turning over. I wished I'd just gone to the dealership myself. I had Dad's checkbook. What's he do? I forgot if they said. Growling under my breath, I braked and let the car drift to a stop behind the pickup trucks. I called Mom's studio on my cell, but there was no answer. She must have been at her gallery opening already. I wasn't really worried about getting home. It was close enough to walk. What I was worried about was those trucks, because they meant that Isabel had been telling the truth. As I climbed out onto the shoulder of the road, I recognized the guy standing next to the pickup ahead. It was Officer Coing, out of uniform, drumming his fingers on the hood. When I got closer, my stomach still churning, he looked up and his fingers stilled. He was wearing a bright orange cap and held a shotgun in the crook of his arm. Do not trust me with any type of firearm. Car problems? He asked. I turned abruptly at the sound of a car door slamming behind me. Another truck had pulled up, and two orange-capped hunters were making their way down the side of the road. I looked past them to where they were heading, and my breath caught in my throat. Dozens of hunters were knotted on the shoulder, all carrying rifles, visibly restless, voices muffled. Squinting into the dim trees beyond a shallow ditch, I could see more orange caps dotting the woods, infesting them. The hunt had already begun. I turned back to Coing and pointed at the gun he held. Is that for the wolves? Coing looked as if he'd somehow forgotten it was there. There was a loud crack from the woods behind him. Both of us jerked at the sound. Cheers rose up from the group down the road. What was that? I demanded. But I knew what it was. It was a gunshot. In Boundary Wood, my voice was steady, which surprised me. They're hunting the wolves, aren't they? With all due respect, miss, Coing said, I think you should wait in your car. I can give you a ride home, but you'll have to wait a little bit. There were shouts in the woods, distant, and another popping sound farther away. Oh. I'm sad. I was just watching Game of Thrones, and never mind, in case you haven't seen it or read the books. The wolves, my wolf. I grabbed Coing's arm. You have to tell them to stop. They can't shoot back there. What if they accidentally hit her house? Coing stepped back, pulling his arm from my grip. Miss? There was another distant pop, small and insignificant sounding. In my head, I saw a perfect image of a wolf rolling, a gaping hole in its side, eyes dead. I didn't think the words just came out. Your phone. You have to call them and tell them to stop. I have a friend in there. She was going to take photos this afternoon in the woods. Please, you have to call them. What? Coing froze. There's someone in there? Are you sure? Yes, I said, because I was sure. Please, call them. I'm not sure how I feel. Well, I mean, she's telling the truth, but God bless humorless Officer Coing, because he didn't ask me for any more details. Pulling his cell phone from his pocket, he punched a quick number and held the phone to his ear. His eyebrows made a straight, hard line, and after a second, he pulled the phone away and stared at the screen. Reception, he muttered, and tried again. I stood by the pickup truck, my arm... Why don't they have radios? I stood by the pickup truck, my arms crossed over my chest as cold seeped into me, watching the gray dusk take over the road as the sun disappeared behind the trees. Surely they had to stop when it got dark, but something told me that just because they had a cop standing watch by the road didn't mean they were didn't make what they were doing legal. Staring at his phone again, Coing shook his head. It's not working. Hold on. You know, it'll be fine. They're being careful. I'm sure they wouldn't shoot a person. But I'll go around and warn them. Let me lock up my gun. It will only take a second. As he started to put his shotgun in the pickup truck, there was another gunshot from the woods and something buckled inside me. I just couldn't wait anymore. I jumped the ditch and scrambled up into the trees, leaving Coing behind. I heard him calling after me, but I was already well into the woods. I had to stop them, warn my wolf, do something. But as I ran, slipping between trees and jumping over fallen limbs, all I could think of was, I'm too late. Chapter 11. Sam. 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We ran. We were silent. Dark drops of water rushing over brambles. What are brambles? And around trees as the man drove us before them. The woods I knew, the woods that protected me, were punched through by their sharp odors and their shouts. I scrambled here and there amongst the other wolves, guiding and following, keeping us together. The fallen trees and underbrush felt unfamiliar beneath my feet. I kept from stumbling by flying, long, endless leaps, barely touching the ground. It was terrifying to not know where I was. We traded simple images amongst ourselves in our wordless, futile language. Dark figures behind us, figures topped with bright warnings, motionless, cold wolves. The smell of death in our nostrils. A crack deafened me, shook me out of balance. Beside me I heard a whimper. I knew which wolf it was without turning my head. There was no time to stop, nothing to do, even if I had. A new smell hit my nostrils, earthy rot and stagnant water. The lake. They were driving us to the lake. I formed a clear image in my head at the same time that Paul, the pack leader, did. The slow rippling edge of the water, thin pines growing sparsely in the poor soil, the lake stretching forever in both directions. A pack of wolves huddled on the shore, no escape. We were the hunted. We slid before them, ghosts in the woods, and we fell, whether or not we fought. The others kept running toward the lake, but I stopped. I think that's enough for right now. Getting close to 30 minutes. Have you noticed that this book is usually closer to 30 minutes, while this one is closer to 20? I wonder why that is. I'm sad. I'm sad. I just killed my entire mood for the day. Sorry for, yeah. Well, that's all I got. I'm too depressed to be happy. That didn't make any sense. Anyway, until next time. Goodbye, everybody. Maybe they're not dead, but I don't know.